We have it. We have it really good here in New York State. There's a brewer that I was in a room with. We were chatting. He's out of South Dakota. I told Hutch, their guild just had to get dissolved and reestablished. It's like he has no resources. He goes, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "What's your closest city?" And he's like, "I have to drive 2 hours to get anything." I'm
like, welcome everyone. Oh. If you guys could put yourselves on mute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It's not an official seminar if Ethan isn't there.
Who is that? There you go. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Transitioning from Homebrewing to Commercial Brewing. My name is Jennifer Myers. I will be the session's moderator. Before we begin, I do want to touch base on a couple things. Please keep yourselves on mute unless you have a question. If you have a question, feel free to post it in chat, and we will be calling on people throughout the session to ask your questions. I'd also like to ask you to sign in the attendee sheet. We're trying to keep track of everyone who's attending the session, so we really appreciate it. And I also like to thank today's allied members and there we go, presenting partner Magliner Hand Trucks, and today's session sponsors Ironheart Canning, Precision Fermentation, and Drink Takes. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our presenters. First, I'd like to introduce Hutch Kugeman. Hutch began brewing in 2002 on the coast of Oregon at the Pelican Pub and Brewery before going to work at Great Adirondack Brewing in Lake Placid and beginning his 18-year adventure working in the New York State brewing community. After 8 years in the Adirondacks and a stop at Ithaca Beer and Soda Company, Hutch settled in the Hudson Valley in 2010 and helped open Crossroads Brewing in Athens. In 2015, Hutch was selected as the first head brewer at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, working with the CIA, Brooklyn Brewery, and the Restaurants Associates to run the brewery and the CIA, where he teaches culinary students about the brewing process. He also supplies the CIA's 5 on-campus restaurants with craft beer. He has won multiple GABF World Beer Cup and New York State Craft Beer Competition medals. He is a graduate of the University of Virginia and American Brewers Guild. Hutch joined the board of New York State Brewers Association in 2018 and currently serves as the Hudson Valley representative. Thank you for being here, Hutch. Next, I'd like to introduce Erik Coleman. Erik has over 25 plus years in the craft beer world and a mission to create the ultimate craft beer and beverage experience. He owns and operates Beer by Coleman and acts as a concierge and consultant. He focuses on consulting for existing and emerging breweries in all facets of opening and operating, conducting tasting events in person and virtual, as well as local and virtual tours to bring his passion and love of the craft beer beverages to all. He is also the director of Trochaire's College Brewing Distillation and Fermentation Program. Currently, he serves as the events liaison for the Western New York Brewers Guild and also co-owns 716 Craft. Hey, Erik.
Oh, Jen, thank you very much.
You're welcome. So let's dive in and get this thing started. So my first topic for you guys is let's talk about the state of brewing today. What are some things to understand if you're seriously looking into getting into this field, as well as some misconceptions?
Sure, I'll start it off. You know, everybody who hopefully is either watching this live or watching it later on is interested in beer because they're passionate about it, right? We all love beer. Everybody in all these seminars loves beer. We love the industry. It's cooperative. It's collaborative. There's full of great people who are giving of their time and knowledge. Anything we say in the next hour is not meant to dissuade anyone from pursuing their passion and becoming a brewer. But I do think it's important to understand that it is a job, and there are some difficulties that come along with it occasionally. But to get to your question, you know, the state of brewing today, obviously everyone's been going through kind of a crazy time the last year, and we've seen our industry has had to change quite a bit. Really developing new ways of getting product out there, new ways of connecting with our consumers, new ways of connecting with beer fans, right? Whether it's in a more virtual world. all of that has trickled to employees, and so I'm coming to you, coming to this as the representative of an employee. I don't own my own brewery. I work for a brewery. So it's a little bit difficult right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. Business is down. Business has shifted from in-person tap rooms and draft beer that would be sold in restaurants to packaged beer in cans. Breweries that were already working that way are really well positioned. And so there are lots of jobs, not lots of jobs, but there are really solid jobs in breweries that are heavily into package, which means bottles and cans as opposed to draft. Breweries that were heavy in draft have shifted. So that has, I think, opened up a lot of entry-level jobs for places that maybe didn't have packaging people before. But it's also axed a lot of upper-level jobs, people who were experienced, maybe not so much in the brew house, but sales, marketing, a lot of people. There's been a lot of change, I think, in how employment is happening in our industry. So there's been opportunities, but there's also been challenges. What do you think, Erik?
No, I concur. And a little bit of a different perspective, but very similar. And I come at it as a consultant who I've helped open, helped operate, everything in between. I've got a couple clients I'm helping literally through COVID with some smaller brewing companies, and then similar to Hutch, from the educational component of, okay, we still have people in our programs that are wanting to go out to get into the brewing world. And with this time of uncertainty, I would have to say the state it's difficult, but it's not bleak. I'd like to say also that it is really forced, because I try to find the positive, because at the end of the day, here we are, it's 2021. We've gotten through the meat of 2020. We're still dealing with the residual effects and what's going to come down the pipe as far as accommodating people and everything else. But knowing that, taking this time and opportunity to really focus inside, look inside internally, and be, what do we need to do to tighten up? What do we need to do as we onboard somebody, and how do we make sure we're really bringing in and leveling up, bringing in the best quality brewers, leveling up brewers, just to make sure efficiencies, productivity, and everywhere in between, from production to packaging, that you're really getting things squared away. So as we go forward into this, we can make 2020 a better year, because like you said, it is what it is. We're here. We got to get through it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk a little bit about some of the realities of what it is like to work in the brewing industry. Oftentimes I think our job gets romanticized, rightfully so in some ways, right? It's beer, it's beer. Like, we're all sitting here having a beer, and those things, it's romanticized for a reason. Those attractive parts of it are true. It is an amazing community of people. We do get to make something we're passionate about. And all of that is very rewarding. You do get that connection with your customers. Maybe that connection's happening in a different way right now. We're not sitting around the tap room having a pint, but all that is true. And we will get back to that thing happening again. We will have beer festivals again, and maybe we'll hate having to work so many of them a little bit less. But at least the first one beer festival, like an hour in, and then we're going to be done with it. But there are some realities, I think, that people are not ready for when they get into the industry, especially if you're going to work as a brewer or as on production staff, because chances are you're not going to start as a brewer. You're going to start in an entry-level job. It's a much more physical job than I think a lot of people give it credit for. It's you're on your feet, it's on cement floors, it's hard labor. Breweries are hot, they're wet, they're humid. Back problems, foot problems, those sorts of things are real. Like, that really happens to people. I personally, as a young brewer, I started brewing when I was 28. So I actually kind of really enjoyed being tired, physically tired at the end of the day. That was a nice change for me from office jobs and other things I had done before that. But you're going to be tired, and you're going to have back issues, and those things are real. Like, that does happen. So working conditions are challenging for some people. You have to be somebody who wants to be up and on your feet all the time. A lot of people like that. A lot of people, it's not what they're suited for. Employment prospects right now are a bit challenging because there's a lot of things in flux. I think that would be not just true of brewing industry. That's true of every industry, unless you happen to be working in the video conferencing sector or vaccine production sector of our economy. Every industry right now, I think, is challenging. People are less willing to take risks I think, and want to hold on to what they've got. Entry level, like you're as a home brewer who is excited about becoming a brewer and getting into it, you're not going to be a brewer. And honestly, if someone is willing to hire you with no experience to run their brewery, you should be very wary of that opportunity. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take it, but you should be wary of it because you're, as a home brewer, probably not qualified to run the business because that's what you're doing. You're not just brewing beer, you're running a production business. So that means you're probably going to start in a more entry-level position. Probably doesn't pay great. If you're coming out of a successful career, if you're someone who's transitioning later in life to the brewing career, be ready for the fact that financially it might be a little bit challenging. You're not going to make 60 grand a year for a while. It took me, I've been brewing for 18 years. It took me a long time to make 60 grand a year. You're going to make $15 an hour. And if you go to work for somebody good, they're going to promote you from within. There's lots of great jobs. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take an entry-level job or one that gives you challenges that is an opportunity for you. You should just be wary of or rather aware of what the situation is. I won't keep going, but Erik, you go ahead.
No problem. And touching on a couple of the similar things, because I'm sure you do it at your program, is when people come in, one of the things I like to do is like, I'm grateful to have the students signed up. I need you to make sure the program stays open. Yay, you want to be a brewer. But then everybody in this room who is a lot of you who own and operate or are involved in the brewing game already, it's open up a brewing company. They said it's going to be a lot of fun. They said I'm going to be a brewer. And while I don't own and operate and I don't brew day in day out, I have and I've done enough. And with my consulting through the program, the first thing we try to make sure, for those home brewers who want to get into it and those who look to hold out of it, there are a lot of institutions out there that are embedding into the students coming through the gates like this is a labor of love. No, literally, it's a labor of love. You're going to be a glorified janitor. It's going to be hot. I know, Ethan, I just saw you, chemicals, steam, Hutch, heavy lifting. Your pay rate's not going to be that high. And there's not a lot of glory. A lot of times you might go without minimal accolades, but you do it because you're an artisan in this particular craft and the way you go with doing what you want to do. Did you have something you wanted to say, Jen? Or I thought.
Well, I just, because you guys have great viewpoints on opposite sides of the spectrum, in a sense, I was curious to know or hear what the biggest misconceptions you get, Hutch, as a brewer from like home brewers, and Erik, you get from brewery owners when they reach out to you. Like, what are those big
From the general public, I would say it's people think we sit around and drink all the time, which you don't last real long if that's what you're doing all the time because you don't get a lot of work done. And people who have never worked in a production environment, I mean, you guys just hit on it a little bit, chemicals, steam, slips and falls, like breweries are actually dangerous places. The very first thing I cover with my students, so those of you who don't know, I teach culinary students at the CIA about the brewing process, and we have an operating brewery. That is a pen, Ethan. Thank you. I'm glad you noticed. The first thing we cover is safety. Breweries are dangerous. Pressurized vessels, carbon dioxide exposure, chemical exposure, these things are dangerous. So I think so you don't tend to drink a whole lot when you're working because it really can lead to some serious accidents. So that's probably the biggest misconception. From home brewers, it's people who think that a recipe is really important. Recipe is not that important. Understanding how flavors work is important. Understanding how to create those flavors in beer is important. You want my recipe for my stout that I've won medals for? Sure, I'll send it to you. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's the implementation of that recipe and honing those flavors. That's what's important. The fact that I use Thomas Fawcett chocolate malt doesn't matter. And so if you're a home brewer and you think I've got this book of great award-winning recipes, it's not that. It shows that you care and it shows that you are able to create flavor, but it doesn't really matter as far as the actual recipe itself. There's not a lot of secrets. Ethan from Community Beer Works is on here. If I asked Ethan for the recipe for that IPA, he would read it to me because the actual ingredient, that doesn't matter so much. Okay. That's probably the biggest misconception I get from home brewers.
What about you, Erik?
From the homebrewers, because in our program, a lot of the people going through, because ours is a true certification program. I mean, there isn't the culinary aspect necessarily added, other than when we go into sensory, we dabble in that. And because we are not a larger institution, you're not getting a degree as if you would from UC Davis, Siebel, Chicago, Vermont, any one of those. It's a certification program. Our student body tends to be a little more mature, a little more older, people looking to change the walk of life, go into it. So that's where we do say, hey, I've had people come through at 55, 60, and I'm like, you want to do this? And that's great. And I love that you have a hobby, but I want to make sure you know what you're into. But a couple of things that we really try to do, at least at our particular program, is when you come in as a home brewer, yeah, you want to be a brewer, but I want to look at what other skill sets you have, because COVID, if anything else, has really pointed out that we need to be very efficient. We need to cross reference, different employees. So I have an intern who he is in his 50s, and he was a head maintenance guy at one of the local private schools that's over 150 years old. This guy's got maintenance experience, whatever. I'm like, oh, so when the manufacturer of the brewing equipment doesn't send somebody out to repair it, they don't know how to fix your problem. We got a guy who's tinkered with 100-year-old boilers and kept the school warm in Buffalo winters. So taking somebody like that and then pairing them in an internship and making sure they get setting up, not just sending them out to the wolves, is like, okay, know that when you're coming in, you want to brew. It's like, I want to brew it there and I want to brew there. It's like, that's not bad, but that might not be the best fit for you, because if you're really going into being brewing and you're passionate about it, you want to have longevity in this, it's got to be a really good marriage. It's not just, hey, go do an internship and get a job. From the owners, same type of thing. COVID, once again, even though there's PP money out there and it can help make you whole with the labor efficiencies, labor staffing, how efficient is your labor, because you're going to keep the labor down. People are just doing a little more. So knowing that when you bring somebody in, an intern, you want to make sure that's like, okay, if I tell them to go grab, I hate to say it, but I've seen it happen, go grab a tri-clamp, and they grab not something as a tri-clamp, be like, okay. Or more importantly, tell somebody's like, hey, you're going to be pushing a squeegee for the first 3 to 6 months and helping in the canning line. Or if it's a smaller farm brewery, like, guess what? You're going to be getting grain, you're going to be humping bags, whatever. Remove your ego. Remember, you're a part of a bigger picture, and you're in this because you love beer, you love craft beer, you love home brewing, and you really want to level it up. So that's the side I see from the educational component, and then from the owners, just making sure it's like, now more than ever, free labor is key, and internships can be great, but at the same token, they don't have the time or the affordability, because owners are now doing more in the brewery than ever for those who weren't. And then the small to mid-size, it's just even more work. It's like, I don't have time to take 20 hours away from the job to go train you for 20 hours, to go back and find this 20 hours somewhere else, leveling them up, and making sure they take it seriously.
Yeah, and to touch on that, Eric, you actually brought up a good point a second ago that I was thinking about. As a brewer, you wear a lot of hats. The smaller the organization is, the more things that you try and do yourself. I never thought I would have to understand how to troubleshoot a commercial refrigeration system, right? That doesn't sound like super, super important, and so when you're trying to get a job in a brewery, any skills you bring to the job from your previous life are valuable. Are you artistic and can do social media posting? Great. Or design labels, are you particularly gregarious and outgoing and can do educational, connecting with consumers? The people who are good at talking to their customers are valuable. Someone's right. Can you do it? Or can you learn to do it? Right? Are you someone who's good at understanding how things work and taking them apart and putting them back together? You can learn a lot of this stuff. I learned how to fix a glycol chiller because mine used to break all the time. And then you learn what they fix. But calling that professional when it's something you can do yourself costs a lot of money. Can you plumb? Can you weld? Can you do electrical? Can you do you have
any culinary skills?
Are you an engineer? Can you work with electronics and computer systems? Like, this stuff is all super important. And if you're trying to break in the industry, using that to your advantage is really important. For my students, I have a mix, as culinary students, a mix of younger kids coming right out of high school, and I have a mix of older, 20s, 30s, early 40s, people who are changing careers and pursuing the food industry. And a lot of my students are not going to end up being chefs in the kitchen. They're going to be in the larger food industry. And so I talked to them about, what are the skills you have that maybe apply to a brewery. We had a student who had worked for the Army, or had been in the military rather, doing logistics. She shipped tanks all over the world. She understood how to get something to Yemen. And I was like, I can get you a job right now in working for a craft brewery, because shipping and logistics is super important, and it's not a skill we have. or a lot of brewers have. Are you great in the front of the house? You know, can you run and manage an operation? Lots of brewers are good brewers. I'm a good brewer. I make good beer. Don't put me in charge of managing the front of the house and doing the books and running the POS system and making sure that, you know, like that's not necessarily where my skill lies, but maybe yours does. So you should be able to bring your skills into it. And it's a good way to get your foot in the door somewhere when you're trying to get a job is, yeah, sure, I'll work the packaging line. Look, I'll do pack on, pack off. That's a boring job, but I know it's a foot in the door. Here's the other things I can do for you. And any company worth their salt is promoting from within first. They're recognizing talent that they have on in the building and helping develop that talent. And if you go somewhere and they're not doing that, then you need to be aware of that and probably be looking somewhere else.
I think that's
Very
a
true.
segue to get into the next topic. Let's talk about what one needs to understand if they're thinking about becoming a professional brewer.
Yeah, that's huge. And I know we kind of alluded a little bit of that when we were just talking a minute ago, but education and training can take on a lot of forms because you have, you know, a world-renowned institution that Hutch is a part of. And you that like if you're a chef but you want to brew, I talked to a lot of chefs like, oh, I'd like to learn how to brew. Like, well, there's an opportunity for you. And that's where you go to an institution like CIA or something along that lines. But addressing, you know, because this is going from home brewer to pro brewer, those who are not brewers yet and they want to elevate their game and they want to get into it professionally, you need to really take a self-assessment. Everybody in here who's either an owner, operator, brewer, or, you know, whatever you're doing instead of, you know, your institution, your business, you've invested in yourself. You've invested in your employees to level them up. So anybody right now who is watching this, take a look, write down what skill sets you've had, what training do you have, even if it's touching on the maintenance, like you said, Hutch, culinary, and then, okay, brewing. Okay, how long have you been brewing? What do you casually brew with some guys and you get hammered and it's a lot of fun? And that's okay, because I've done that too. Or it's like, do you have somebody who is geeking out and they also happen to have a biochemical engineering degree or something like that? And they're really into the minutia and they're really monitoring the gravity in there. They're tweaking their recipes. So it's like that. And then what are you willing to do? A lot of people, having been in the game quite a bit, and I'm lucky because of who my dad was and who he knew and getting into it before it became super cool back in the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of people, at least here in Western New York and throughout the state, didn't maybe go off to school to become a brewer right away. They didn't go to get any kind of formal training. They didn't go to UC Davis. They didn't attend CBO. Maybe they took a course or two, and especially back then or up until just, you know, the last 3 to 5 years, the online based programming wasn't a thing as much. You could do it, but you paid a little bit more through one of the larger institutions. So it's like, okay, what are you willing to do? Now you want to go into it and you have a job. We understand you can't quit your job. A lot of us have been there. So it's like, find a program that does have nights. Maybe you go for a certification. Maybe you take a few classes online through them. Maybe you go through the CIA that Hutch, program has, and really investing in yourself, taking some kind of a certification course, taking some kind of that training, because I'll have people say, it's like, I talked to a couple breweries and I said, I want to get into brewing. And they asked, what do you do? I was like, well, I homebrew. I was like, okay, that's cool. And like Hutch, you said, it's like, this is everybody's livelihood. I don't care if you've got a 3-barrel brew system that you installed that's $20, $30, $40,000 to your 30-barrel with 110 fermenters and everything in between that's, 350 to a half a mil. You can't just let somebody come in off the streets. They've obviously got to get trained by you, and you don't want to just work with anybody. You want to make sure it's like, okay, what do you bring to that table? So the educational opportunities are out there. Those are some of the things you need to look into. And I know when Hutch and I were talking, you got to do a little bit of digging, and you got to find the right fit for you. And if you can go and get an in-person training, that sometimes is a little bit better. And I'm saying that as somebody who runs a virtual program right now, and it's asynchronous. It's working, and I'm very grateful for it. So it's just investing in yourself, looking inside, going out, and what actions are you taking, and then working with those skill sets and also leveling up your game. That's my take on how it can be important. You don't necessarily have to have a ton of it, but you better be willing to go get it to get into it.
Yeah, and if you really are committed to joining the industry and you really do want to be a brewer and it's what you're passionate about, and like I said, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from doing it. I did it. We all did it. It's great. I love my job. It's still a job sometimes, and it can be frustrating and anxiety causing and heartburn inducing. But if you don't have experience, that's okay. You just have to set your expectations, appropriately. If you have no experience working in a brewery, you need an entry level job.
Mhm.
And if you're at a point in your life where you can't survive on $15 an hour, and I completely understand that, that might be challenging. You might have to look at a hard look at your financial situation and say, what can I get by with? The job I took when I was 28 is not a job I can take now. Entering the thing, you just financially couldn't afford to make that little money. I would like to say that salaries have risen exponentially as our industry has thrived. But we're still in the service industry. We're still not that far apart from restaurants. Margins are still very slim. Starting salary isn't that much better now than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Now, some places it is. I will say in general, production breweries pay better than brew pubs. They also have larger staff. So if you can get your foot in the door at a production brewery and work your way up to brewer, you're going to probably do better financially than you would as a brewery restaurant. You're also going to have a lot more responsibility in handling a much larger budget and larger operations. So you should be paid more, to be honest with you. As a brew pub guy, that's hard for me to admit sometimes. So please don't tell any of my friends who run production more money than I do. I just think you need to manage your expectations a little bit. And I think you need to look at, Erik said, look at what your skills are, where you need to grow. If you don't feel like you have a great palate, that's something you can learn. If you don't feel like you have a lot of knowledge in styles and flavor profiles and where those flavors come from and how you create and control them, that's all things you can learn. So I'm sure we're going to talk, I'm sure, in a few minutes about different educational programs that are out there. Internet's a great resource. It's almost an overwhelming resource when you Google something, how to learn beer flavor. You're going to have more information than you can possibly sort through. We're going to try and point you in some of them, but start looking at things you can do to improve yourself.
You guys have a question from Jim. Jim, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, been a long time since I've been a brewer. I ended up taking brewing with a brewer and then going like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe I want to get into it. Taking some correspondence courses, was all ready to go out to UC Davis, and then ended up going around New York State and getting a job. So I guess what I'm wondering right now is, what are your recommendations? Do you recommend going and getting a job, seeing if it's something you want to do first? Or do you recommend, getting yourself schooled up in a program? I think there's probably more opportunities to get into a program than there were back in the late 90s when I was doing this. So maybe give some advice on what your best.
Yeah, that's definitely a chicken or the egg comment. I'm going to have to say, I recommend you go get the educational training first, even if it's a series of workshops, a certification course, or something, along the lines, or some of the online things you can definitely do. It's not to say you can't. It will give you a little more validity. It will give you some of those necessary skill sets, because like Hutch was just saying, you can go, if you haven't, in any homebrewers, I'm assuming you have a copy of it. You can go get Mosier's book, tasting beer. You can go get Palmer's book. White Labs puts out a bunch of really good videos, and the New York State Brewers Association is a great resource, as well as the BA. But go get some kind of training. Definitely recommend that. Schooling if you can. And once again, I know Hutch and I both said it and alluded to it. It's what can you handle? Because based on your work schedule, I have people right now in my program, they're still working on an internship, and it took a year just because of family and work life. They're moving very slowly, but we plugged them into a right place that is accommodating, leveling them up, and amending their schedules a little bit. It's like, okay, hey, you know what? We'll do a brew day on Saturday, because you can stay a little longer to clean up and, hone those skills. Because, if you walk out of packaging, once again, you're not necessarily going to get on the brewer's deck right away. You're going to learn CIP. You're going to learn, how to clean, caustic, CIPing, and things like that. That's my recommendation. Hutch, what do you say? What do you think?
Opposite. I'm going to say you should try and work in a brewery first before you commit money to education. But it really depends, honestly. That's what I did. It's what worked for me. It really depends, I think, on what the opportunity in front of you is. Do you have an opportunity to go work in a brewery? Then yes, absolutely, go do it. Make sure you like it first before you commit several $1,000s to some sort of educational program. If you find that you're having a hard time getting that opportunity, then while you're still doing your other day job, sure, go ahead and pursue educational stuff, because it might make you a more attractive candidate to jobs that come your way.
Mhm.
I personally, for me, I think getting my hands dirty and working the job first worked. I learned how to do things and the proper way to do things. Then I went to school and learned why that was the proper way to do things and be a better understanding of the science. But that's because that was the opportunity I had. So I really think it depends on each individual situation. I went to the American Brewers Guild. Like I said, we're going to talk about individual programs in a minute. That was a distance learning based program and still is, designed for people who are working full time to kind of take courses on their own time. There were guys I worked with who had, I was younger, they had families and they were committed to being in northern New Jersey because that's where their life was. And they had a hard time finding a job because at that time there were 3 breweries in their area that they could get to in a reasonable amount of time. And even though they were good, talented people, they weren't able to make the sacrifice of moving, for instance, to get a job. It's a lot different now. There's a lot more breweries within 40 minutes of everybody's house. And so you have more opportunities, right? So I think what Erik and I are showing is it can work either way, but it depends on what your capabilities are and what opportunities are available to you.
It goes back to what we both said. Do your homework, make sure you're ready and willing and wanting to go into it, and knowing that whether you do it up front or at the end, you're going to have to invest in yourself, time and potentially some financial resources.
I will recommend education at some point because there's a lot of holes that can be filled in. Excuse me, I'm going to turn on some lights in my house.
I just want to say real quick too. I think it's important to know that anybody can brew. It's a process. You're following a recipe. What you educate yourself on is the whys behind it. Why do you have a temperature of this? Why, I think Hutch touched on it with flavors and everything else. So, when we talk about brewing, there's more encompassing than just, putting some grain into a pot and letting the sugars extract. But this isn't about me, so I'll stop my little spiel. But I see Chris Erickson.
By the way, Jen is a former brewer.
Yeah.
And was a really good one. So don't let her pretend like she doesn't know.
Yeah, you have real world practical application over there. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. All right. I see Chris Erickson has his hand raised. Go ahead, Chris.
The only thing that I was going to say is just kind of echo what Hutch said. And that is like, we've had the brewery in Lake Placid for 25 years. And in the last few years, we've actually had people who have come in very excited to learn how to be a brewer, who have been trained for 6 months or a year and then decided that brewing wasn't for them. And that's a new phenomenon for us. We'd always had people who have come, learned how to be a brewer, and then gone on to other breweries. But I think that there are people who they think that they want to be a brewer, and then when they actually learn what it's like on a day-to-day basis, just find that it's not for them and have left the field. So to spend a lot of money on education versus spending my money on training you how to do something that then you might not want to know how to do is definitely, I think, better for people trying to break in.
Thanks, Chris. Steve, you had a thought question?
Yeah, so this event couldn't have happened at a better time. I actually just got done looking at a rental space for my brewery that I want to open up. You're probably going to laugh. I don't have any commercial brewing experience. I'm a home brewer. I brew every week, every other weekend. I'm really big on my processes more than recipe development. If my wife would let me, I would buy a DO meter, but she won't let me for some reason. I can't figure that out.
I don't either, so it's okay.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for somebody going from home brewing to a brew pub to a eventually production facility?
Timeline, like, so when do you expect to be, like, realistically thinking, hey, I would love to be selling my beer at X point in time? 18
months.
Okay.
I'm hoping you are already somewhat connected to the local brewing community and you know some brewers. I would start offering services, seeing if someone will pay you hourly to come in and work, because there's things, you don't know, like proper CIP and cleaning of a tank, how to carbonate beer in a bright tank. Some simple stuff, how to put in a draft system, simple stuff that you're going to need.
Okay.
Lessons that you don't want to learn by having to dump beer down the drain.
Okay.
There's lots of stuff you're going to learn. I mean, look, you're going to make mistakes. We all made lots of mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. But you want to try and do is get your processes down and understand the day-to-day of, okay, here's how I produce a batch of beer commercially. Right
Okay.
here. So I would start reaching out. You'll find our community is very, very giving, and people are giving up their time. You might have to do a little convincing for brewers you don't know that you are serious and this is what you're doing, and you're looking for, here's the knowledge I'm looking for, because there are a lot of people who say, oh, I want to be a brewer, that's great. And you hear that enough times, you do begin to tune it out a little bit. But I would do everything I can, as you can, to get some time in a brewery.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So I went to SUNY Schenectady for actually beer brewing, the associates.
Oh, okay.
You've got a good background. That's a great program.
Yeah, that's a great starting point.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. But I'm looking at taking courses with the CIA because I really want to get into the science behind hops and yeast. Those two subjects fascinate me. Does the CIA offer anything like that?
No, our programs for the public are very enthusiast focused.
Okay.
So like beer and food courses, come be a brewer for a day sort of courses. And right now, because of COVID restrictions, our campus is completely shut down to the public. So we're not doing any in-person brewing courses, but there are lots of places where you can do that stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I guess now is a good time as any to talk about different places you can get education. And there's some big national ones and international ones, and then there's some good local ones. I'm doing some research, trying to put together a list. There's a bunch of online places, everything from short courses, like Siebel Institute offers 2 and 3 week courses, to UC Davis Master Brewers program that's several years. Just to go through a bunch of lists. So the big national ones, you've got UC Davis, Siebel, the American Brewers Guild, which is in Vermont, the IBD, International Institute of Brewing and Distilling, MBAA, Master Brewers Association of America. You've got ASBC, the American Society of Brewing Chemists, all offer programs. Brew Lab offers programs. BJCP, someone mentioned earlier, and Cicerone program are great programs when it comes to general beer knowledge and flavor knowledge. If someone walks in my door and says, I'm BJCP, I'm not going to all of a sudden be like, oh, I should hire you as a brewer. But I am going to know that they care about beer and and understand how to analyze flavor, and that they're committed enough to it to take that step and learn those programs. So those are not necessarily programs that are going to help you operationally, but they are programs that will help big picture for beer knowledge. Here in New York State, we obviously have Erik's program that can help you with really, and Erik, you can talk a little bit more about what you focus on.
Yeah, this isn't a sales pitch, but because we have a couple programs here in Western New York, ECC, Pete, Keith, and that team, they do a really good job. When I took over, what we did is making it more applicable across the board. It was very heavy science. The previous director was a PhD, and he will forget more knowledge about the science end of brewing than I will ever possibly gain. But one of the things that we did want to instill, based on some of the needs here in Western New York, was, and I've heard it in some of the happy hours here, it's like they don't teach you distribution, they don't teach you sales, they don't teach you marketing, some of these other things. So somebody like you who you do have some of that training underneath you, went through Schenectady, going out to a program like ours where we have the intro, or we have sensory, we run you through, and at the end of that you will take the level 1 test, because if you're going to own and operate a brewing company, you should at least have that, just to understand, because that'll really level you up on everything from proper lines, glassware, presenting, talking. If you don't feel comfortable with that, or you might be a little more introverted, it'll allow you to have more confidence. Then we go into intro and science of brewing, and in the science of brewing, we do get kind of deep into water. We use the water yeast books. We do get into some of the other mineral compositions based on where you're at and how you can find out what your water quality is and what you need to add. And then we will get into yeast propagation. We will get into the malt and the hop aspects and the varietals and how to do it, and we'll even bring in some of the local hop and malt people here in New York State. So that way you're going to learn about it, but you're also going to learn about it in the New York State world, because the farm brewing community is quite large and pretty resilient here in the New York State area, and we're doing really good. So that's what we do. But once again, it's not the end all be all. It's something you recommend. Our program runs for about a half a year, and then you can get the certification. But in your case, to touch on what Hutch said, not that I was saying don't go in and try to work in a brewing company. I know here in West New York, for a while, interns had a bad rap because they just walk in, they'd flake out and quit, come in and say they knew how to do something and couldn't, and it just wasn't exactly the best. The programs have really tried to work and freshen that up between ours and the other ones. And that the fact that the New York State community is fantastic. We are a very tight-knit group. And once you become a part of that community and people know you're serious and you're legit about opening, you're not just opening and doing pop-ups and giving away samples and really, asking questions and not talking about what you're doing, but listening and inquiring. You'd be amazed. You might not get the secret sauce, but people will come in and say, listen, here's some of the things you need to pay attention to. And I don't want to jump into the last topic we have, because this kind of slides into that a little bit, as that just immerse yourself wherever you happen to be located in the state, be it you're in, I don't know what size of facility you're looking to do, but go to the small guys, go to maybe some of the bigger guys and say, listen, I'm here. I just want to come in and help. Maybe you volunteer a little bit, and then they might be able to hire you a little bit. Or, here's my schedule, and I want to be able to come in to just learn the game from the brewing aspect. Like Hutch was saying, is being able to also, do you know how to do, the other things? And we'll get to that in a second. But that's my recommendation on what we do at Trochaire.
And Steve, if I just want to, and you might mention this real quick, Hutch, but for two of the subjects that you were talking about that you're interested in, I know Cornell Extension at one point was doing a lot with hops, and I think they were getting into yeast. I'm not sure with COVID if things have changed, but I would definitely check out their website and see if they're still offering anything. Generally, they were one day, all day, kind of like course where you would get certified after, or get a certificate, I should say, but really informative and pretty awesome. So that's just another idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the explanation. That was awesome. If you want to add it, BYO is putting on courses as well. BYO.com. I signed up for the yeast course. It was $175, but they send you a kit that you go through. It's a 4-hour course. I don't know if you want to check that out or not.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I mean, I have a number of students who are always looking to kind of pursue the next level of stuff. And so I like short courses like that. I mean, I did a longer program, but when you say, hey, look, I want to learn more about hops, and an idea of a shorter course that focuses on hops, I think is a really attractive thing. Some of the programs we mentioned, some of the places, since you said specifically, Steve, you were looking for more science-oriented stuff about raw materials. I think the IBD, Siebel, a lot of these places offer concise courses that are 2- and 3-week programs that might be, what you're looking for.
Awesome. You want to get into breaking into the business, guys?
Yeah, sure.
Unless you have more to say about education. I know we were getting into it, kind of like led nicely into one thing to the next, but so if you want to open a brewery, how to start, when and where.
Well, I would play the lottery aggressively.
Yes.
No, I mean, look, money's a real thing, right? So there are lots of people in our industry who can talk more appropriately about how to raise funds than I can. There is a reason why I'm an employee and not a brewery owner, partly, but it's also partly because I see what it takes. Running a brewery is incredibly hard. It's a labor of love for sure. It's going to be frustrating, and you're going to work as hard as anything you've ever done in your entire life. And I've watched my friends do it, and so I know how much work it is. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should do it if it's what you really are passionate about doing and you want to do it. Just figure out, I think, my advice, and I'll let Erik take over because he is much more experienced in the structure of what you should be looking at. But think about what your voice is going to be in the industry. Who are you as a brewery or as a person? Your brewery should be a reflection of you and of your community and of what you want to be. Do you want to be a neighborhood corner brew pub and really represent that in that community? Do you want to be part of a larger city? Do you want to represent a neighborhood? What's your voice? Why should I buy your IPA? Right? Everyone's going to have one. Yours is going to be good. Mine's going to be good. I happen to keep seeing Ethan's face up here. Ethan's are great. Like, people make great beer. So why should customers come to you? What are you going to do that's different? What are you, or rather, it doesn't have to be different. What are you going to do that's fun? Right? How are people going to have a good time at your business? You are now entering the hospitality business. Whether you're just somebody who likes beer, or you know, you think it's an interesting idea, you're now in the restaurant and hospitality bar business. So why should someone come and spend their money at your place? So that's what I want you to think about. Who are you? What do you want to represent? And why should people spend their money with you?
Paul, did you want to jump in? I saw you wanted to interject here.
Yeah, sorry. I just, as you guys are talking about, you know, wanting to open your own brewery, you know, and you're right. You guys, I think, are putting it in good context in the sense that, you know, it's a lot of work. Like I just had an hour session a little while ago about brewery accounting and my head almost exploded. Like, just the side of the business, like this would make me enough, like, never to own a brewery, just the amount of numbers and things. But I think that if anybody's thinking about owning a brewery, be careful about, like, you know, you and your best friend are going to open a brewery, or you and your girlfriend, or you and your wife, or partnerships. In my 7+ years in this, I've seen breweries go down because best friends opened a brewery. And, you know, all of a sudden one had different ideas than the other, or the money wasn't there, or one was getting paid and getting a salary and the other one had their full, like, there are so many variables. And we've actually had, on the professional side of things, we've actually had, I think it was 2 years conference, 2 years ago, had a whole session on, you know, from a lawyer saying, if you're going to do this with your friend, get a lawyer and have a breakup clause, like a prenup. And it might seem like we're never going to break up, but, you know, Chris Erickson's no longer on, but he owns Lake Placid Pub and Brewery, and he did that all those years ago. And his partner said, I don't want to do this anymore. And guess what? It was on paper. There was an out. But I've seen breweries close over this issue. So that's just something I wanted to throw out there.
Agreed, totally, Paul. I'm glad you brought that up. You know, you have to approach it as you're building a business. You're going to have employees. As an employee, you should have, you know, written job descriptions and contracts. As in my personal experience, everything I've ever done on the handshake has probably come back to bite me. That I should have gotten, there were things I should have gotten in writing, and not because people are bad. People are good. It's just sometimes you have different expectations, and something that's said over a handshake ends up not coming to fruition. So I would be just aware that you're opening a business, that there needs to be structure to it, that you need to have things in place for how the business is going to operate, for what different responsibilities for different jobs are going to be. And then, as Paul mentioned, you know, an exit strategy, because there might come a time when 10 years down the road, you might be the one who's got 3 kids and is like, you know what, I can't work these hours anymore. I need to be home with my kids on weekends and holidays. And I need a way out, and we need to have an agreement on how that's going to work out. So what do I get for my 10 years of hard labor when the business is going to continue on? So, but sorry, Erik, I'm going to turn it over to you because you have a lot more experience with coaching people through the process of opening a brewery.
No, and I'll lead with an example. I had a meeting with a couple individuals here in the Western New York area that wanted to open a brewing company. They have an incredibly dialed in homebrew setup. They make some very good quality beer. Their attention to detail is pretty good. They have a little lab, which I was like, I was impressed with what they're doing. And one of the things that I don't want to come across negative. I quit a whole nother career, 18 years in the educational world, because this is my 40, 50 hour a week side hustle. And my passion just took over, and I really wanted to get into this, that and a few health issues. So I understand the headaches while I don't own a brewing company yet. I know what it's like to take the leap of faith in this world. But when I was meeting with these individuals, they had the acumen to come in, and what they probably could have done is some really good beer, small to mid-size scale. But when I started explaining the work, the hours, the requirements, and then it's like, you two may be best friends of 15 years. You've got to remove all of them. They were like, well, yeah, we've kind of thought of it. Like, no, to what Paul said and to what you said, you got to have exit strategy. You got to have some really good paperwork drawn up, because it's, what if somebody wants to leave? What if something, God forbid, you die? Does your wife want to be bought out? Does your wife want to keep it? Okay, what if something happens to both of you and your kids? What if your kids want to do it? The minute you have a family, you have to think of every little thing, because if you don't prepare for it up front, you can't go in and fix it after the fact once you're going. Yeah, investors, Paul, thank you. Because that's the other thing. A lot of people are like, I got a great idea, I make a really good beer. And there are people who are not even necessarily angel investors. Somebody's sitting on somebody like, I'll invest. And I unfortunately have seen it a couple different times where people's dreams started out phenomenal and they hit it. And they hit some lightning in a bottle, and then they had to expand, but they didn't have the money because the money was already tied up in the first round of metal. And all of a sudden the investor's like, I'll buy in more. Let me buy some of your shares. But the clauses weren't amended from the original contract. And then the investor who was seeding more money says, I'm going to keep more of these. This is now my brewing company. And the people who were the labor of love, the journey to get it to where it is, all of a sudden don't own their dream anymore. And that's really sad. And it's tough. But on the flip side, opening up a brewing company can be great. It's something you can be proud of. You're an artist and you make a product that people want. That's the beautiful thing. You know, you're not pushing something that's like selling, you know, vacuum cleaners door to door. People like beer. There's a good chance if you're doing a pretty good job, they're going to like you. But going back to the business side, you know, location. Let's be real. Just because you see where the hot areas are doesn't mean that's where you go. Look where the need is, because sometimes what you want to do and where you want to do it isn't best for the community. Because remember, you are now a part of a bigger picture. Yes, you got to look out for yourself. Yes, you are making money, but you've got to pay attention to the bigger picture, because that's how we win in this together. And I am very proud to say what I see in New York, Western New York State as a whole, we're doing a better job than a lot of the other places in the country. That's really good. And then also, as you're building it out, there are so many things people don't think about. It's like, okay, now you got to go find the metal. First things first, don't have the eyes bigger than the stomach aspect. I want the 20 barrel, I want this, and I want that's like, that's great. Next thing you know, you're going to be house rich, cash poor. You're going to have all this metal, and then you're not going to be able to absorb yourself, because as we all know, if you say you want to open up this July, it's probably going to be September to maybe further. There's going to be more expenses, and you might not be making a ton of money right out of the bag. Are you insulated for the first 3 months? You better be able to walk in to handle absorbing your costs and making sure you can keep the lights on and everything else going forward, because if you don't pay attention to COVID exacerbated that you really have to be aware. Yeah, architects, like, you're going to come in and do this, and you think you want to do it, but then there's all the minutia of, I'm going through this right now with a client. We have an architectural engineer, and I'm working with the construction, and then we're dealing with the city of Buffalo, and it's a lot of work. And if you're not a general contractor and you don't have the money for one, you better learn real quick what to do and kind of cover your butt. And then, okay, great, you got the metal in, you've done all of that. That is fantastic. You have run the race. No, you're just getting ready to really run the race, because once you get it ready and you're ready to open, then you're open. You are now responsible for people's livelihoods that are working for you. You're responsible for a product that represents who you are and what you are in the community. And when something breaks, that's where you go from being the owner, you're also the janitor. And there's a lot of owner and operators in here. It's like, you're the mechanic. When the pipes back up and it's Sunday night and you're doing a transfer, and all of a sudden you're like, WT, whatever, guess what? You got to figure it out, and you got to do it. And you can't say, well, I got a wife and kids and my wife's going nuts. Well, if you're going to do this, really, that, you know, it goes back to what we were even talking about with regards to really looking internally. What do you need to be a brewer? Make sure you're willing to go the long haul, because there's phases, there's a number of big components. And while it is very rewarding and it's very amazing, and I know when I talk with people that have a beer, grateful for it, that you got to be in it. This is a longer haul, and just be willing to learn, be humble. And if you have a problem, don't bite your nose off to spite your face. Because of the Western New York community, because of the various communities throughout the state, and then in the New York State Brewers Association, I'm not just saying this to blow smoke. If you are struggling, I'm going to tell you right now, Paul and his team are a phenomenal resource, because if you don't know it, or you reach out to somebody like Hutch and I, we don't know, I mean, call Paul. You never know who is going to have that gal or that guy that's going to be able to help you out in your time of need. So those are some of the things. we could talk about this for hours. Hutch and I are kind of talking because this is a slippery slope where you could just really get into it because as a consultant, because I've done everything from writing the business plan, getting it approved, overseeing the construction, and getting up. I mean, it is not hundreds of hours, it is thousands of hours to when you're open in that first 3 months after you're opening. So just, make sure you're listening, make sure you're learning, and then make sure it's what you don't know that's going to hang you up, and just be open and ready to adapt, adjust, and learn and seek help when you can.
And I would say operationally, not just about the business stuff we've been talking about, but look at your location with a critical eye. It's very easy to fall in love with a beautiful historic building. You walk into some place and it's got exposed steel and beams, and you're like, wow, this is a beautiful place to sit. I can see people sitting here having a beer. But that doesn't mean it's a good place for a brewery to operate because of the other requirements you need. And I've seen people lose all their money on the building that they bought that needed, so much work that it ate up all their working capital. And then they never had any money to recover and continue to grow the business the way they needed to. If you don't feel like okay, what am I missing here? Go talk to a local brewer and say, man, look, let me buy you lunch. Give me $100. Come in, look at my place, and tell me what would it be like to work in here? Maybe you don't know that you really don't want to be working on wood floors. That you can do all the coverings in the world to try and make those wood floors better, and you're going to cover them in this and this and this. There's still going to be wood floors underneath, and it's a bad idea. Or that, hey, we can't put it, we're in a historic district, we can't put in a garage door because they won't allow us to put that on the outside of the building. Well, good luck getting a pallet in there. You're going to be humping bags of grain from the street and kegs every day. Or we can't, things like that. Or these are great ceilings, but they're 12 feet tall. Well, it's 12 feet enough, maybe. Depends how big you want to be. Maybe not. So, we're in a downtown city, so we have no outdoor space at all except for our building. Okay, well, where are you putting pallets of grain and dirty and spent grain and dirty kegs? Like, all of these are things you need to think about beyond just this is a beautiful location that I like. Any location can work. Okay, you go to Brooklyn Brewery, they are now crammed into Williamsburg, and they had specially made silos that are basically look like shipping containers instead of being a big vertical silo, so they could be inside. Like, they made that work, but you have to be aware that these challenges exist. And so if you don't feel like what the challenges are, it's worth your money to pay to do it. So you get someone to help you out. And if you can't afford to hire a full-time consultant, hire a local brewer for a day to come in and say, hey man, look, here's $500. I need you for a full day to look at my space and give me feedback.
Yeah, do your homework.
Yes, do your homework is a good way to put it.
Steve, did you have another question?
I just wanted to comment on what you were saying about it running up. I've tried to start a couple businesses in the past. I've done all my projections, but I have never been in a situations where I keep seeing the dollars roll up faster than what I thought it was. I'm literally 3 times higher in my projected cost right now than what I thought it was. The person I met with today, he is great. He told me today, he goes, I want to see you succeed. He goes, I would be willing to give you free rent until you get on your feet and start generating revenue. I'm like, wow. I was very surprised, and I am finding, because this is the second person I talked to, and I am finding that these local places that have spots available are really willing to work with breweries.
That's great. Having an owner partner, or as far as a partnership of someone who's invested in your success is really important. And a lot of business owners see the value of a brewery. Breweries bring in traffic. They bring in other businesses. So having something like that on board sounds great. Obviously, everything is check your P's and Q's. And yeah, Ethan, great comment. Breweries are great. Yeah. You're going to put a lot of work and equipment and time into that space. You don't want to move, right? Trying to move a brewery and thinking that your fans are going to follow you across town doesn't work. A lot of people, I mean, will they? Sure. Not all of them. So that sounds like you have a great opportunity in front of you, Steve.
And Steve, on that note, yeah, Paul, great thing. If you're not in New York City, you have the ability to deal with a little more openness. If you happen to be in New York City, you're narrowing your scope quite a lot. I know Hutch and I talked, and this kind of goes to anybody on a serious note, because this is a community of giving. We just had the living hell kicked out of all of you and us in this industry, no matter whether you're Hutch or I or any one of you out there, home brewing, looking to get into an operator, owner, whatever. Reach out, ask. I know, please feel free. I know Paul put it in the chats. Email me. I'm not looking to get you as a client, but I'll sit down and I'll walk you through some of the questions and shed some light on that area. And there's a lot of people in this room that will do the same thing. And it just goes back to what Hutch said. And I know a couple other people have alluded to it in the chat, is just reach out, ask. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about somebody thinking, oh, they're going to steal my recipes. Quite frankly, they probably don't care about your recipes. They don't. They just want to make sure you're not going to go out in our community and do something that's going to embarrass the brewing community as a whole, because brewing companies are not like bars. They're not necessarily like restaurants. We're community builders. Families come in. Some places allow dogs. We aren't open until 2, 3, 4 in the morning necessarily all the time. We try to have an outdoor beer garden, which can sometimes be pet friendly. We want to enhance and become a part of a community, not just there to have a shot and a beer and a great time. Not that we don't do that, but we're all about that community too. So as much as I get hard on people and saying, you got to be willing, because you're going to invest your time and you could lose your livelihood if you don't pay attention. But it's, pardon my French, it's a hell of a community to be in, and I'm very grateful for it.
And I want to mention one thing too about location, that I think that you will probably see an uprise here in the coming years, but I think you'll see breweries moving towards malls. I know Paul and myself have been approached by companies that are looking for breweries to move into malls because they're looking to make them more experienced, and they are desperate. And so, Steve, I'm not quite sure where you work, but it's always an idea, because they have the space, they can help you with the build out, and they're going to build around it. And so that's always good when you want people to come and stay at your brewery. So you can always ask us too, but I think, Paul, you want to add to that?
Well, you make a great point, Jen, a really great point. And they're not going to be malls anymore. They're reimagining malls. So you're talking about apartments and stores, and they want, they know breweries bring business. And so they're incentivizing breweries. And we saw Beer Tree do that down in Binghamton, and Jen and I are close to Rochester, and the Wilmots own a lot of malls, and they're thinking about doing the same. So, I mean, if you're interested in opening a brewery, it's something that you might want to explore.
Interesting idea, but you think about a mall and they've got parking and usually good traffic access. They have high ceilings. They've got warehouse space. They've got loading dock space. They've got industrial water. They've got industrial sewer. They've got bathrooms. I mean, the idea of, that the mall isn't the romantic idea of a brewery and an old factory, but functionally,
yeah,
it may be really interesting. A couple of resources I want to mention before I forget. In addition, obviously, you're already, if you're watching this, you're already in touch with the New York State Brewers Association, and you're seeing all the great seminars and information and learning you can get through this. If you're not already somehow involved with the Brewers or National Brewers Association, the BA Forum, the daily email forum is a great resource of information. ProBrewer.com, a great resource of information. It's been around for years and has a lengthy history of discussion forums with great information. Our New York State Brewers Association closed Facebook group, which is for members only, a great resource of information. There's another Facebook group called Craft Beer Professionals, a great resource of information as well. They also offer a lot of educational resources. That's a mix of brewers and industry people, and so there's a little bit of sales pitchiness that goes on in that, but there's also a lot of really talented, smart people on there who can offer good information.
And dovetailing on that, reach out to your vendors. They want to work with you. They want your money. For example, through the brewing school, I'm fortunate that even though I taught it and I built a lot of the, modified a lot of the curriculum, he's actually in here. You see the big still thanks, Andrew Harden. I retain Andrew to be like one of our lead professors because he's got a ton of history. He's worked on the small, he's worked in the nano. He's got a lot of experience. Yes, buddy, I wanted to give you a shout out. And then also, I have a head distiller, but it's through their connections, like they knew some people at White Labs. And even though I'm running a brewing school, they're like, we'll come in, we'll give you different things. We'll run seminars for the public through you because we want to work with some of your other people. Use us. And it's like, okay, you might not think of it. And then, from your local, if you're a farm brewery, there's a lot of local hop maltsters. I'm not trying to promote anybody, but I know Chris from the New York State Hop Guild. He'll travel all over the state. He's on Binghamton, but that cat's in Buffalo quite often and everywhere in between. So don't think that just because they're going to try to sales pitch you, it's not like going to a condo association timeshare meeting where you got to sit there forever in a day. And,
No buffet usually. So
yeah, no buffet.
Yeah.
But people will come and they'll try to help you out where they might say, listen, I'll allow you. Prime example, when the New York State Association, when you all have the meetings where you go to a different brewing company and it's, so you want to open up a brewing company and you need Brendan and you bring Stefan and you all show up. Those are great resources. And some of those vendors will also do the same thing because they want to put their best foot forward for you as well. So I just wanted to point that out as, you don't have to buy from them necessarily to use them.
Although we've tried to kind of bring a little reality to the situation of what it's like to own and run and be in our industry, it is a great industry and we all love it or we wouldn't be here. We're all, Paul and everyone else is taking their time to participate in these things because we like the industry. We want to see it grow. We want to help you realize your dream. So don't be afraid to ask for help. You'll know right away people who maybe are not is into helping, but for the most part, 95% of people have been where you are and somebody helped them. And so they're going to want to help you in return. And it's really it's not a competitive industry. It's a much more cooperative industry.
Yeah. Don't think you have to reinvent wheels. Reach out before you try it out on your own.
And to reiterate what you just said, Hutch, we were at a brewery in Poughkeepsie maybe last month, and he's new to the brewing world. He came from the restaurant world, and his response to Paul and I was like he couldn't believe how willing other breweries were to help him, where in the restaurant industry is very cutthroat, and he's like, I'm blown away about how much help has been provided for us and how much encouragement. So definitely there's no never feel like you can't reach out to anybody, not just local breweries too. But before we end this, is there any last questions or comments? Go ahead, Erik.
And this is not trying to, give you guys a shameless plug. As somebody who does not own a brewing company, I have no skin in the game in what the New York State does, other than, I assist with the brewing companies. I have been working with a gentleman, and I'm just going to bring this up really quick, to show the love, be a part of, support the New York State Brewing Company or Brewers Association, because you have access to the resources. And pretty much everybody in this room, I'm assuming you already know this, but we here have something that is not found everywhere else in the state, because I'm working with a gentleman out of South Dakota who I met, and the South Dakota Brewers Guild just got dismantled and is getting reassembled because it opened. There's a little shady business going on, funds left. It is now trying to get repaired. The state and local governments are squabbling. And when I was talking to this individual, through the networking, they're struggling. And he goes, we have no moral compass in the brewing world. We don't have an association that's looking out for our best interest, fighting for still being able to ship your beer and self-distribute and all of the things that we take for granted here in New York State, or maybe you don't. But I only mention that because there are a lot of states that they're struggling. When I tell them what we have here in New York, they're jealous. But it's like, as much as we have a lot of uphill battles here in New York because of just some of the things, is we all know what I'm referring to. The fact that we have an organization like this is pretty tremendous. So make sure whenever you can, show the love and support, because and I'm not just saying that, but it's tremendous. I myself, even not owning a brewing company, have personally benefited from the help of the New York State Brewers Association. So please make sure you support and show the love. That's all, Jen.
Thank you, Erik. Yeah, I definitely think, New York definitely has some of the more friendly laws for the craft brewing industry than most states. So we're very lucky. And, it wasn't that long ago, Paul, what was it, maybe 10 years ago, where you couldn't even buy a pint at a brewery?
Oh, no, less than that. I mean, yeah, Ethan, what would you say, or Hutch? It was the Craft Act passed, I want to say in 2000.
5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago. So people forget that even 5 or 6 years ago, you couldn't go into a brewery and order a pint of beer.
Well, you could,
Or
but
Oregon.
those breweries had to have gotten tavern permits, and they
Yeah.
weren't
Yeah.
they weren't given out to breweries that easily. Flying Bison suffered for years because the SLA would not let them get a tavern permit because they said, well, you know, customers have to walk through your like brewery to get to the bar. Stupid.
I remember
Yeah.
being so confused as a consumer, completely not understanding why I couldn't get a pint of beer at a brewery. And it was just about 6 years ago. And it's just incredible how much it's grown since then. Thank God.
We had 38 breweries when I moved here in 2002. So
Yeah,
Wow.
it's grown quite a bit.
80 something now.
Adam had a comment. Adam, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, Paul, I noticed you've got Billy Bear in the background there. That's really, to me, a symbol of what kicked off homebrewing and what really helped inspire the craft brew industry. And, you know, the whole industry as a whole, I compared to the wine industry, and everyone's kind of been pointing out at this, is you come in and talk to a brewer or an owner of a brewery about the industry, and they open up to you. They will share recipes, techniques, problems they've had, experiences, suggestions. You go to the wine industry and try to ask those questions, and they shut you down. Your competition. It's not the level of companionship in the beer industry is just phenomenal. There's no other industry like it.
Well, let me point out something interesting also about this Billy Beer. If you can see where it was brewed. So
Yep.
that's an interesting fact. I mean, it really was the first contract brewer as well. And they contracted it throughout the United States. And in the Northeast, it was actually the FX Matt Brewing Company that made this beer. So
Fred Mack was actually the inspiration for Billy Beer.
Awesome. Well, any last thoughts or comments, guys?
No, look, this is a great industry, and anything we've said today shouldn't dissuade you from joining. You should, if it's what you're passionate about, you should chase it. We just want you to be realistic about what it's like. Please keep supporting your local breweries. They need your help as much, more now than ever before. And other than that, just enjoy beer.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you to all our sponsors, Hutch, Erik. We really appreciate it. This was a great session. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to email all three of us. We appreciate it. I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Oh,
That's-
Jen,
Yeah.
really quick, let
Yeah.
me just post the YouTube page here.
Oh yeah, and if you haven't already, thanks, Chloe. Please subscribe to the NYSBA YouTube channel. You can watch any session you may have missed or one that you've already been a part of if you wanted to go back and see it again. So, and she'll
Yeah.
post that.
Our allied members who supported us and make this possible.
Yes, we wouldn't
Yes.
be able to do it without them. So thank you all very much. Cheers.
cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers, everybody.
I'll hang on for a